Cloudcast Media.
Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, amplifying the voices of social impact organizations, entrepreneurs, local nonprofits, and other community champions who shape the culture, creativity, and connectivity of San Diego. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, bringing good things to San Diego for over 60 years. Learn more about what is good for you and good for all by visiting www.missionfed.com.
I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media. It is such a pleasure to have one of my longtime colleagues with us today, and that's John Maffei. And yes, that name should be very familiar to anybody that's involved in high school sports, arguably the top prep sports writers forever in this region. And John and I worked together when I was at the San Diego Union Tribune. He is still writing for the San Diego Union Tribune. How you doing, John?
Doing very well, Drew. Thank you.
Well, listen, what a storied career that you've had, and you're still doing it. And you have so much enthusiasm of what you're doing, and your writing is always crisp, as they say, and insightful. Talk about the fact that you've been doing this for how long now?
This is 53 years.
And you are just as sharp as ever. I know you're revered in that world by certainly the coaches and the athletic directors and the players and all that business. I met John, I'm dating myself now, when I was working for the Daily Aztec at San Diego State. John was in SID in that division, and you were always very kind to young bucks like us, always giving us good leads and all that. You'll laugh at this because it's going way back. So my beat for the Daily Aztec, I also worked for the Coast Dispatches, you might remember, was covering Rudy Suarez, girls volleyball team. And Rudy, known as the Tasmanian Devil, was a world-recognized volleyball player, correct? Remember those days?
Oh, the Taz was one of the greats.
He was, and he was great promoter of his the girls volleyball team as well. Also, I was fortunate enough to cover Mary Cave. Remember Mary?
Yes.
Golf coach for SDSU women and all that business. When did you morph between the SID and then sports writing, or were you doing it simultaneously?
No, I started off kind of lucked out as I was at San Diego State playing baseball. I had a chance to play my senior year. I had gotten hurt on a collision with our first baseman and kind of broke my face, and had a red shirt, and then was coming off a broken thumb. So I had an extra year and was fighting for the starting job. And Larry Littlefield, who was at the sports editor at the Escondido Times-Advocate at the time, Larry was kind of absent-minded. He was trying to call the football office, call the sports information office, where I was kind of a student assistant.
Right, that's right.
And he told Mike Ryan, the SID, he said, "Oh, gee, while I have you, we're going from," and the Times-Advocate was a 40,000 circulation daily newspaper at the time.
Yes, it was.
And he goes, we're adding an extra, we're going to add a third sports writer. Do you know anybody? And I was in the office and Mike handed me the phone. Who knows where your career goes if Larry actually gets the football office?
No, you're 100%. That's right. And of course, we knew that very well. Encinitas Coast Dispatch would, share some, not necessarily share, but work closely with the folks at the TA, and also at the Blade up in Oceanside and Vista Press and all that business. We all sort of cut our teeth on those things when they were actually typewriters. Remember that?
Typewriters, and people don't. There were 9 daily newspapers in San Diego at one time.
Yeah.
And now we're down to 1.
Yeah, exactly. It's the one you work for. So when you started doing this sports writing full time, it was covering more than just high school, correct?
Yes, and which is nice. It was at the Times-Advocate. The focus was on the preps.
That's right.
And but we were a daily newspaper. We covered the Chargers. We covered San Diego State and the Padres.
Right.
And it gave me a chance to kind of branch out. And I was there a year and a half. And Mike Ryan, who was my boss when at San Diego State, he left in August. and they were dying for sports information director. And here I'm a 22-year-old guy, and I go, well, I love the college scene. I applied for it and got the job.
I know.
And,
the rest is rock and roll.
I had 2 weeks to get ready for Oregon State. And that was our first football game.
Right.
And so it was kind of a whirlwind right then.
How long were you at SID?
7 years.
Was that? Oh, my goodness. Okay. And when did you leave?
In 78, after the 78 season, the Times Advocate again was looking for a sports editor. And,
gotcha.
And as much as I love the college scene, I said, boy, I have a chance to be the sports editor of a daily paper, and jumped at that chance.
Yeah. Do you remember Dave Siegel?
Yes.
Dave Siegel and I worked together daily. He actually hired me when he became the sports editor of the Encinitas Coast-Dispatch.
Okay.
And Dave eventually went to the Davis Democrat, if I'm not mistaken, and then was doing some business writing in Honolulu. I'm not sure if you stay in touch with Dave at all.
Yeah.
But talk about before we get into it, I would be remiss if we didn't give a shout out to your longtime friend and colleague and mine as well, who still does some freelancing, Steve Brandt.
Oh, Steve is Steve's a balloon with the air let out. He's all over the place. He now lives in Lake Havasu, Arizona, and still freelances for the UT and for the Pomerado News. And he'll call and he'll complain about how hot. I said, Steve, it was your choice to move to the hottest place on earth.
Exactly.
But he is great. He'll drive me crazy, but it's a good crazy, and that because he's really into it. He's very concerned, and I can give him just about anything, and he'll take off and run with it.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And just full disclosure, when we launched our sign-on radio shows, actually from the Union Tribune in 2007, and we decided to start a prep sports show. I got to co-host it with Steve Brand and with Jess Kearney, then assistant sports editor. And of course, John, you were a frequent guest on that show. Yes. And we were live at the time, as you remember.
Yes.
And so either you'd come into studio or you'd call in and all that business. Talk about prep sports. Has it waned at all in interest from the community standpoint, or even from a reader standpoint? Or chat about that.
I think it's on the upswing. To be honest with you, I wish at one time at the UT we had 4 full-time prep writers, and now it's just me. And I miss Jess Kearney desperately because Jess was such a great mentor and so organized, and now I'm writing, and we have a kind of a stable of part-timers, stringers as we call them in the business,
right? And
and trying to get the stringers out to things and cover them, and they've added girls flag football,
right?
It's just taken off. We went from 44 schools last year to over 60 this year.
Wow.
And the quality of play is really good. And the girls are really talented.
And it's a CIF sanctioned sport?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
And sand volleyball has taken off. And if anybody has seen the Cathedral Catholic girls volleyball team is going to play for a state championship on Saturday.
Right.
And they are, if you want to see volleyball at the top level, Cathedral Catholic girls are it. So yeah, and football will always be king, but the other sports are right there.
Absolutely. We're talking to John Maffei. He's a sports writer for the San Diego Union Tribune. He's been doing this for 50 years as a sports writer in the world of sports. How long at the Union Tribune now?
This is 12 years since the merger of the North County Times and the San Diego Union Tribune.
I would have said longer than that, but that's right, 12 years. And so I think I left the paper in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, and so forth. What would you say? You got to tell a story, and I can tell one too. When you first started, there was no electronics. You had to write your story maybe on a pad, then had to go to a phone to call your story in. We had typewriters. There were no computers. Talk about that.
Those were the days, and and people now. I started in junior college, and we were still using hot type. And people go, what is hot type? It was a giant machine. Exactly what you said. You would type your story out.
That's right.
On paper. You would give it to what they called a linotype operator. The linotype operator would then type it on this giant machine that clattered like crazy.
That's right.
And it would give you lead bars of the type. And if you were in junior college, we only had one. But if you were at the Union Tribune or the LA Times, there would be a massive room of linotype operators. And so I go all the way back to hot type. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I got it. Was at the very end, but I'm glad I got a taste of that.
Well, I got to tell you a funny story on this. And I think for the people who have just got into journalism and they can actually, type their story on their laptop and hit a button and they send it and all that business, they can edit right there. We didn't have that opportunity. I remember the very first game I covered was the San Diego Mustangs versus the Torrey Pines Falcons. And at the time, you had to, at least for the paper I worked for, because it was deadlines, it was like 11 or 11:30 on Friday to get the story in on Saturday. Of course, the games were on Friday. And you had to call in the story verbatim.
Yes.
We had no rewrite people. It was like what you came out of your mouth is what's going to be in the paper.
Right. And if you were lucky, you might have a game that was close enough to the office to go back. But if you were in Fallbrook and there was no way you were getting back to the UT, so you had to call it in.
Right, and this was the Coast Dispatch, which was in Encinitas, and we still couldn't do that back and forth. But I remember, you were all wound up because you're hoping, okay, I got to call this story in verbatim. It's not like a rewrite person. And you hope, please don't fumble the ball. Please don't have it get. I had the whole story all written, and then something would happen at the end, and that went the story. Right, exactly. Right. But that was the best training. Talk about that too. We had great training because we had to work under different deadlines.
Yes. Oh, and it was great. I mean, it's funny because Terry Monahan, one of my good friends and colleagues, and I don't know if people remember, there was an ad on TV where it had a picture that said the old sportswriter is sitting in the stands and he's typing his story on a laptop, and this is well before laptops, and we'd look at each other and just laugh and go, yeah, sure, that's ever going to happen, and that you could send a story from the venue. And then go home. Yeah, but you're right. I mean, formulating a story in your head, dictating your story off the top of your head.
That's right.
Was the way it was done.
But and of course we could almost speak in those terms. I could almost to this day I could say the San Diego Mustangs upset the Torrey Pines Falcon, 28-14 in an Avocado West football game led by John Maffei's 220 yards rushing on 13 carries.
Well, thank you.
But it doesn't leave you. You are
yes.
John, when we come back, we want to talk a little bit more about some of the championships that are coming up.
Great.
Post haste and that aspect of it, and then if you don't mind. I mean, this could be a 10-hour interview, and I'm telling you, we wouldn't be bored at all. And I want you to go think about, when we take a few seconds for a break here, some of the most amazing things that you covered, whether it's a game or it's an individual. When we return with John Maffei, longtime sports writer for the San Diego Union Tribune, longtime sports writer in San Diego County itself. I'm Drew Schlosberg. You're listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show. We are the nation's longest running community podcast, now in our 18th year, brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union for 6 decades, just doing great things in San Diego County. We will be right back.
When you do your banking with Mission Fed, you get great rates on auto and home loans. That's good for you, but something good also happens for a lot of other people. We're not for profit, so we put money back into the community to help lots of great nonprofits to keep San Diego strong. So you're not just getting something good, you're doing something good. Come to Mission Fed. It's banking that's good for all.
Brand amplification is the DNA of Cloudcast Media, and our code is the powerful blending of sound, voice, and storytelling to lift local brands and their communities. Whether it is our Brandcast, Schoolcast, or Causecast platforms, the unifying ethos is all about this community, the one you call home. If you dare to dream and want to explore the brand amplification of Cloudcast, a national leader in local podcasting and other Winfluence strategies, please visit us at cloudcast.us.
I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media, and you're listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union. Honored to have in the studio with us longtime friend and colleague, literally iconic sports writer for the San Diego Union-Tribune, John Maffei. So we have some championships coming up, correct?
Yes, semifinals in all the divisions tonight.
Yeah.
The open division, the big boys, play tomorrow night. Cathedral Catholic and Lincoln are playing 7 p.m. at Snapdragon Stadium, and it's going to be a doozy.
Will they sell out?
No, they'll only open up one side.
Oh, okay.
And last year it was Granite Hills and Lincoln,
right? And
they sold out. They sold out the east side of Snapdragon, and then they opened up both end zones and filled up both end zones.
Nice.
So and it will be at least that tomorrow night, if not more.
Right? Is there a Lincoln favorite? Who's favored?
Lincoln's.
Or do they even do favorites in prep sports?
Well, and I do. I do a prep predictions every week.
That's right.
Lincoln has to be favored. They're the 1 seed and the number 1 team in the county. Achilles Smith Jr., the quarterback, the son of Achilles Smith, is going to Oregon. He's a great player. Cathedral Catholic, Lincoln won the first meeting, the league meeting between these two teams, 27-7. I'm picking Cathedral in this one. I don't know why. They're a little bit bigger. I think they'll figure it out. They have to contain Achilles and keep him in the pocket because he killed him scrambling out and picking up big yards. But I think it's going to be a great game. No, I think that's terrific. Talk a little bit about, you said one of your favorite stories, you wrote one recently on Marlon Carey. Talk about that. Thank you. That was Marlon Carey. For people that don't know, Marlon was a running back at Mount Carmel High School. He was CIF Player of the Year in 1994, Parade Magazine All-American, and full ride scholarship to USC. Marlon's career got off the tracks. He didn't go to school. His second semester at Mount Carmel, SC revoked his scholarship. Oh my goodness! He went to Georgia and roomed with Terrell Davis, who a great San Diego player at Lincoln, right? Yes. And Marlon won the job. The number 1 running back came home on a break, smoked weed with some buddies, went back to Georgia and was drug tested. Failed the drug test. Oh my goodness! So he leaves Georgia, comes back to San Diego, wants to play at San Diego State. But San Diego State's throwing the ball then. And Marlon goes, I'm not going to San Diego State because I'll never carry the ball. So he ends up at Boise State. He plays a little bit at Boise, gets his girlfriend pregnant at that time. And, being an upstanding guy, he has to provide for his girlfriend and the baby. Well, he comes home on a break and hatches the plan that the only way I can get money is to rob a bank. So he then kidnaps the branch manager of the Escondido of the Bank of America. The plan goes completely wrong. He ends up holding the branch manager and her family captive overnight. They then go and rob the bank, and he gets $200,000. But 2 weeks later, he gets caught. He gets 4 life sentences. Kidnapping is an automatic life sentence, right? Plus 96 years for the bank robbery. And he's in prison for 27 years. And then the state of California passes a youth offender law that says if you commit a crime and a nonviolent crime, because he never harmed them. Right. And what Marlon said, he goes, nobody got hurt, nobody got raped, the gun he held was a BB gun. Okay. Well, as anybody knows, BB guns look pretty real now. And,
exactly.
And he was completely remorseful, and got his AA degree in prison in computer science. He is a licensed barber, and he was up for parole under this new law. He was turned down the first time, and the family that he kidnapped was in court, didn't say anything, and so he was turned down. The second time he came up 2 years later, the family was not there. And and Marlon says, I think they saw how remorseful I was, and so they stayed away. And he was granted parole, and he is out of prison now.
Wow.
At a halfway house, and he gets out of the halfway house in February, and he's only 48 years old. He's in great shape. Unless he completely took me in, I believe him. I think he is rehabbed. He is ready to rejoin society and become a member of society.
That's a great story. That's and I guarantee you, you probably have 100 stories, maybe not all like that one. So not a fair question, but I gave you some time to think about it. Talk about your favorite game that you've covered, okay, or a favorite game. There's too many of them. You probably did. And then the interview with an athlete that you enjoyed the most.
Wow, that is tough. Some of the great highlight. When I was working at San Diego State, the 1975 Final Four, San Diego State hosted the Final Four, and in the sports arena.
Go Bruins!
Yeah, UCLA, Syracuse, Louisville, and
Kentucky.
In Kentucky.
That's right.
1984 got the World Series. The Steve Garvey home run was as good as it gets. 1998 at the World Series in New York. I got to the workout day really early because I'd never been to Yankee Stadium.
Really?
And that was my first. So I wander out to Monument Park in center field, and I'm just taken aback by it. And there's a hand on my shoulder, and it's Tony Gwynn. And Tony had the same idea, and he just looked, and he calls me Mafe. He goes,
right.
Mafe, can you believe that two Aztecs are sitting here in New York City in Monument Park on workout day? And I said, T, I'm getting kind of misty here.
Well, and for those folks who don't know what Monument Park is, in the old Yankee Stadium, and even in the new Yankee Stadium, but the old Yankee Stadium, they had the monuments in center field during play.
They were in play.
Of course, you had to hit the ball 470 feet to get out to the monuments and all that business. And they were of Ruth Gehrig DiMaggio. Am I missing someone, or am I wrong on those?
Although they're all out there. Billy Martin. Every retired number of the Yankees.
But at the time, there was only four, right? I mean, back in the day, right?
In the day, it started with Ruth and Gehrig, and now Yogi Berra, Whitey Ford.
Sure.
All the Yankee greats are out there.
Who is one of your most favorite interviews as an individual?
It has to be Tony Gwynn.
Right. You were friends too, though.
Yes, we were friends, and one of the best parts about covering baseball, covering the Padres at the time, was getting to the ballpark at 2:00, and for a 7:00 game, Tony would have already taken batting practice. And then we just sit on the bench and talk. And Tony was very much into high school sports. His son, Tony Jr. was starting to come up and play. And so, he'd pick my brain about that. And the one thing Tony loved when Tony Jr. played, Rancho Buena Vista was very good.
Right.
And they had a big center, Jamal Mosley. And Tony loved the way Jamal Mosley played, and I hooked Tony and Jamal up, and Jamal couldn't believe it. Jamal goes on and plays at Colorado, plays overseas, and is now the head coach of the Orlando Magic.
Yeah, those are great stories. John, promise me, I know you're busy as can be, but come back on and want to continue the stories, of folklore in San Diego prep sports, if you don't mind. We'll tee it up. Bring in if we can get Brand ever get out of Lake Havasu, maybe we can have him join you or something like that.
Absolutely.
Or maybe bring in my buddy Kirk Kenny, who you worked with and still
Yes.
work with for a while. Kirk was a prep sports writer and now covers the Aztecs. But if you don't mind, would love to have you come back in. There's
I
so
would
much
love
to
to
share.
Yes, absolutely.
And all that business. And encourage our listeners, you got to read John's stuff and so forth. He's a delight. He's a treasure. Are you in the Sportswriter Hall of Fame?
No.
You will be. You know that. Do you have to be retired to get in that moniker?
I don't know.
I know that's nothing important to you, but it's so well deserved in that aspect of it. So, John Maffei, great seeing you. You were a great colleague. You are now a great interviewee, and so forth. And we'll look forward to having you come back on.
Great, Drew. Thank you.
My pleasure, John Maffei, longtime sports writer, iconic sports writer in San Diego. Last 12 years for the San Diego Union Tribune. Take a look at all his stuff. He's got some championships he'll be covering in football and certainly with basketball and baseball and all the sports in between. You've been listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show. We are the nation's longest-running community podcast. We are now in our 18th year. Brought to you by the amazing folks of Mission Fed Credit Union, 6 decades of doing great things for people living in San Diego County. We hope you enjoyed the interview.
You've been listening to an episode of Drew Schlosberg's Spotlight on the Community Show, amplifying the voices of social impact organizations, entrepreneurs, local nonprofits, and other community champions who shape the culture, creativity, and connectivity of San Diego community. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, bringing good things to San Diego for over 60 years. Learn more about what is good for you and good for all by visiting www.missionfed.com.
Cloudcast Media.